Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've managed to have a good break from your screens and enjoyed some lunch. We've got a great afternoon ahead with 3 presentations before we close. So our first presentation this afternoon is all about how you can use data to create meaningful relationships with your supporters. So I'm going to introduce Claire Donner, who is mobilisation expert and UK director at More Onion. So over to you, Claire.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Data Matters session. So in this session, we're going to be looking at one specific type of data, which is the one that we think is most important for supporter engagement, which is data about what the supporters have actually done. So we're going to be looking at the benefits, the challenges of getting that data, taking care of that data, managing it well, and then using it to create richer experiences. We're going to be doing this by sharing a few case studies with you. So a huge thanks to the organizations that have agreed to be a part of these case studies. I think it's really a useful way to bring things to life. Cool. So first things first, hi, my name is Claire and I work for More Onion. So strange name, yes. We are a digital mobilization agency and we work exclusively with charities and progressive not-for-profits. So we do a range of things from consultancy to design work and technology development. So we do a lot of hands-on work with organizations, and we also see the technology side, which I think gives us a really hopefully useful perspective for you here in this data session. My background is in the UK charity sector. So before I joined More Onion 6.5 years ago, I worked for Greenpeace, ActionAid, Amnesty, and Cancer Research UK. So the technology side of things, we have a platform called Impact Stack. It's a campaigning and fundraising platform. But the session that we're going to be going through today does not require you to have this. We're going to be using examples that use this system simply because those are the clients and organizations we, of course, work with very closely. But a lot of what we're going to go through today is going to be applicable to a lot of different systems. It's general principles and approaches to take forward. At More Onion, we work with a huge range of organizations, from the really tiny all the way through to international NGOs. So I hope that our perspectives are valuable for you regardless of the size of your organization. We work with and understand a range of different sizes. So enough about us, let's jump into the session. Today, we are going to be focusing on how data can help you to win your campaigns, to raise some money, to engage your supporters, whether you're trying to get volunteers or an event, whatever. This is all about supporters and how you can make their experience richer. So why does data matter? As digital communicators, we can't really achieve any impact without good data. We can't send emails, we can't, communicate, build relationships with people unless we know who they are, how we contact them, and what they've done in the past. And I want to really emphasize that data management is very much everyone's responsibility. If you're fortunate enough to have a data team, don't leave it to the data team. As communicators, as campaigners and fundraisers, it's our responsibility to work out what's needed to increase the impact there and to work with the data team if you have one or independently to create that impact. Last year, my colleague, Jess, gave a speech, a talk at the Charity Commons conference, which if you're interested in today's session, that's probably really interesting for you as well. So if you finished today's session and you wanted to hear some more, get some more insights and ideas, do presentation. There's a link on the screen right now, and of course we can send that to you separately as well. If it's helpful for you to take notes, of course, please do, but just to say, there's a number of free resources available for you. You will, of course, receive these slides. We have a number of free reports that I think would be interesting for you on the website. So that's moreonion.com/free reports. And we are literally finishing the front cover of our new report, which is directly relevant to today's session. So this is a free report we're going to release next week, which is called Creating Richer Support Experiences Through Integrated Technology. So this report is designed for campaigners, fundraisers, and communicators. It's not designed for people who do data first. It's designed with you in mind. And it's got 5 really interesting case studies to show data flows and approaches of different organizations. So if you're interested in that, please head on to our website and simply join our mailing list. You'll be the first one to hear about that next week. Okay, so in Jess's session last year, she asked a question of you. The question is, what is standing in the way of delivering more integrated communications? Now, I don't know how big your screens are, so I'm going to read a couple of these out in case you're squinting at the small text. So the most popular response was organizational silos, followed by slow data transfers, so manual processes. I would categorize these barriers, all of them in fact, into 2 categories. One is structural barriers, so internal silos, the way teams operate, resistance to change, for example, and technical barriers. So this might be data flows, the technology available to you. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be using these results from last year, the input that we've received from you, and we're going to be sharing with you some real case studies to show how charities are overcoming these challenges, whether that's a temporary workaround, or whether that's a long-term solution to something, so they can get around these structural or technical challenges. I have a question for you to kick off. So, have you ever asked a supporter to do something that was irrelevant to them? So for example, have you asked someone to sign a petition when they've already signed, or become a regular giver when they're already a regular giver? Or finally, have you sent a campaign action to someone for whom their location is irrelevant? For example, a UK health issue to somebody based in Wales. Now, if you're not sure, say, I'm not sure on this. I'm going to give you a poll in a second. Only say no on this poll if you're sure you've never done this. So there's a link on the screen, and there's also a QR code. The voting is as simple as one click. So I'll give you a second with this now. If you scan the QR code on your phone, you'll be able to vote to answer, have you ever asked a supporter to do something irrelevant to them? Okay, so fingers crossed technology plays here and we get the results. Yay, fantastic. Thank you so much for voting so quickly. The results will continue coming in as well. If you're still voting, please do. So as you can see here, most of you are saying that you believe you have asked a supporter to do something irrelevant to them. So the reason I'm putting this here is just to emphasize very few people have perfect systems and are able to do exactly what they want at all times. So if you're worried about your systems, you're worried about your technology or your data processes, don't worry, everybody's in the same boat. We're all just trying to improve and get better, but we're not expecting perfection. So be kind to yourself. And remember, we've got 6 votes here for no. Those of you who voted no, I would love to hear what your tips and tricks are. If you wanted to share things in the chat with participants, that would be wonderful. And you can share and discuss there. Thank you. Okay, so moving on, because I haven't got a huge amount of time with you today. So impact starts with strategy. This is true regardless of what you're trying to achieve, whether you're trying to win a campaign, design a supporter's journey, raise money, etc. The same is true with data. You have to have a data strategy. So 3 of the key questions that you're looking to ask here. Why are you collecting this data? How are you going to collect it? And then how are you going to use it? So we're going to be exploring these in the case studies as well. And as I say with the poll, don't be discouraged by perfect. Almost nobody has the ideal data collection, integration, and use system. But what we're trying to achieve is to take steps forward to get there. So I like to think of it as a bit of a cycle, where we're boosting impact now and we're working towards a better, easier future. So step 1 of this is to make those strategic decisions. What data do you most need to achieve your impact, whatever that may be? So I know it's tempting to think, oh, I need these 12 pieces of information, but prioritize, think about what's absolutely critical for you, what's going to have the biggest difference, going to make the biggest difference. So the step 2 is to find a way of making this priority data flow in a usable way. This might involve finding some workarounds, this might involve using pilot projects, working outside of the usual system to get that piece of information. Of course, do cooperate and communicate well with your colleagues, but maybe you try something a little bit different here if you're not getting what you need through your existing systems. When you then have that data going to the right place, you use it to create your impact, whatever that may be. And then you use the impact you've created to strengthen your case, to make changes to the structures, to make changes to the technology, to improve that approach, and you continue. So you're continually taking steps forward towards your goals with data that is informed by good strategy. Just don't be discouraged by the pursuit of the perfect. It's okay to have a dream, but do take steps forward to improvement. And improvement is always better than doing nothing, because you can't have the 100% fix. I know a lot of organizations have CRM projects in the works. CRM projects are very important, but they take a long time. So don't say, I'm not going to do anything with data for 2 years until our CRM is in place. Work out what you can do now to increase your impact by finding these simple solutions. So I'd like to share with you some examples of different organizations and how they're using good data strategies and data flows to create impact. The first is from Shelter England. So they've identified 3 data priorities. Their first is authenticity. So this means the supporter's relationship to the housing emergency. Are they directly affected, indirectly affected, supporting solidarity, etc.? And they prioritize the former two categories, people who are affected. They also have geography and activity level. Activity level is how many and what type of actions people have taken. So let's dive into those a little bit more. For authenticity, to collect this data, they simply ask. They don't include this question on all forms. For example, you wouldn't include a question like this on a hand raiser or an entry action, but they do include it on many actions, so they can collect and use this data. For how it's used, they will send fewer donation asks to people who have a lived experience with the housing crisis. Hopefully that was quite obvious. They will use it to recruit spokespeople and also to invite people to join their local community organisers leadership team. The next piece of data, geography, again, they simply ask. So they have a postcode field on all of their forms. For some of them, they need to explain why they have that there. For example, in the screen grab here, it says, giving us your postcode helps us to make our campaigns more relevant to you both locally and nationally. So when you're asking for data that isn't obvious why it's needed, you have to explain why you're asking for it. The postcode field, however, on some types of actions, for example, if you're doing email to MP action or a council or a local paper, you obviously need the postcode. You don't need to explain it so much, although explanation is always welcome, but they include it on everything because it's just so central to their global data strategy. You want to make sure that you have a reason for collecting every piece of data that you're asking for. So here they have a reason and they've clearly articulated it, and you should be able to do the same. So you can see here the postcode request from one of their forms. All right, how they use it, they connect people with their local hubs. They do a lot of really great local campaigning. They also use it to target and mobilize people in key constituencies and to analyze their actions after they've happened. So how many MPs were contacted, how many target MPs got custom messages, for example. For example, this action in Bristol. So they're able to send different things to different people in different ways and really increase their impact with that. Activity level, how it's collected, this happens automatically. So with any good campaigning or fundraising platform, you'll have the ability to track who has completed which form. So this is true of Shelter, who are on Impact Stack. When they take an action, the user gets a tag, which indicates what action they've taken. They can then use this to filter based on type, frequency, date, etc. They also use this to then send, of course, follow-on actions and reminders. So if you sign a petition on a particular topic and there's a next action, say an MP action, they can target people and they can change the messaging. And they also have a thing called their Heroes program. So the Heroes program is offered to people who take more than 3 actions in a year or complete a higher bar action. And they then offer these people a dedicated email journey when they meet these conditions. And should they sign up to be a hero, which is a form that they fill in, they can receive SMS, online, offline actions. They can get special loyalty content. They can be the latest, they'll hear the first campaign news, like the first to hear. So they've got some really interesting ways of building and deepening those campaigner relationships through tracking and having access to that action data. Okay, so how do they do it? Technical implementation. There are a few different approaches to how you get your data to move and how you get your data in the place you need it to be. The approach that Shelter take is what's called a best-in-class approach. This simply means that they choose individual pieces of technology that best meet their needs, and then they connect those pieces of technology together with integrations. The alternative to a best-in-class, or rather the other end of a spectrum, it is very much a spectrum, is an all-in-one solution. So with an all-in-one solution, you need less integration, but you might have to make compromises on different pieces of functionality because you're getting the whole package, you have less control. So an example of this might be if you're using donation forms which come as a part of your CRM. A CRM is your supporter database. It's a shorthand for that. So Shelter use best in class. They pick the pieces they want and they connect them together. So if we look at this in a diagram, a supporter will take an action on a campaigning and fundraising platform, which in this case happens to be Impact Stack. The data is then automatically exported via webhooks. That basically just means the system puts the action data, so the fact they've taken a specific action and the data they submitted, to a secure location online. What happens next is there is a system called Talent. It's just a third-party system that Shelter use, which goes and collects that data from the secure location and imports it into their CRM, which is Microsoft Dynamics. They then have that data available to be queried and send those emails. So the impact stack to Talend is near real time, and Talend to Microsoft Dynamics is twice a day. So they have their data really frequently without having to have a human intervention, which is really powerful. And it allows them to create really good impact and really quick impact, which, to be honest, speed can be really critical. So in this example, many of you may be familiar with this. It was a very, very popular, very wide-reaching campaign. Beginning of the pandemic, around the first lockdown, of course, that people were worried about being evicted. So Shelter launched a petition and a social media action in just 2 days because they already had their systems in place. So they were able to mobilize so much support for that they were able to have a really big impact, where the minister just the next week announced an eviction ban. And to quote Tom from Shelter, the online mobilization was fundamental. It allowed us to get the government's attention, and I really don't think the government would have changed its mind on this without it. They also do some really powerful local campaigning. I do recommend signing up to the Shelter list. They do some really great work. Yes, and that's the Shelter case study. Let's move on and have a look at something slightly different. So the next one is Refugee Council, and this is a fundraising example. So Refugee Council have welcome journeys for new supporters, both fundraising supporters, both donating supporters and non-financial supporters. So what they need to know, the most important piece of data for these journeys, is the type of donation that people have made, the date of the donation, and the value of the donation. And of course, whether they've made one, but the absence of a donation is information itself. So how this information was collected, so the value, type, and date is automatically collected when somebody submits a donation form. Hopefully this is true with your system too. Have a chat to your tech providers if you're not sure how to do this, but that information should be available in your donation platform. And you should also be able to tag that people have supported a specific appeal. So the thing we mentioned earlier with Shelter, when someone completed a form, the user should get a tag or some kind of indication that they've completed that specific form. So you can tell not just that they donated, but to which appeal. In terms of how this data is used, there are different branches for thank you emails. You, of course, want to thank people who've donated by referencing their donation. And you want to thank people who've supported in other ways for the other ways they've supported you. There's also, if people have made a one-time donation, they don't get asked to do it again for a while. So if you've given in the last, I think it's about 8 weeks, then you will not get asked to give again. You get loyalty content, you get thank you content, you get engagement, but you don't get any more asks for that period. And then, of course, they also remove regular giving people from their standard non-regular giving welcome journey so they can get a different experience. It's a very hyper-simplified version of part of their journey. So if you were to get a welcome email with an engagement action, people who are donors would get some loyalty, which thanks them for their donation. People who aren't might get a donation ask. You can see how that works. Okay, so how does this work in terms of technical implementation? First step, as always, is that the supporter takes an action. So they complete a form. Now, the CRM that Refugee Council are using doesn't support integrations. They're currently doing a CRM project and they're exploring, trying to find something that works for them better. But for now, their CRM simply doesn't support full integrations. So what they have instead is the data from Impact Stack, whichever form you're using would do the same, but from Impact Stack automatically exports the data by CSV. A CSV is a comma-separated value file. It's basically one of those documents you open in Excel. Once that CSV has been exported, it gets loaded into their CRM. This process, sadly, is manual because, as I say, their CRM doesn't support that integration at the moment. And then it's exported from the CRM into MailChimp. So that's manual, which means it's a bit slow. So what we've done to make sure that the welcome journeys don't have to wait potentially a whole week before they find out who's given and able to give them the right thank yous and the right branches. There's a direct integration between Impact Stack and MailChimp. So what we have is when somebody submits an action, it goes immediately to MailChimp and it goes to the CSV file. So the data that goes from Impact Stack to MailChimp is 99% accuracy. It really only doesn't reflect donations and actions taken offline. So if somebody calls up Refugee Council, makes a donation, of course, it will not be included there, but it will include everything from their web forms. So we have an instant 99% accuracy, and then in the week, it goes to 100. So we're able to be quick and responsive with these communications, but still have that accuracy. So that's the compromise that's been made to create really good communications despite some challenges with the CRM. And the final example I wanted to share with you today is from World Animal Protection. So World Animal Protection were campaigning to stop this reptile market that was happening annually at the Doncaster racecourse. They wanted to make sure that they were also identifying who lived in and near Doncaster versus people who didn't, because they knew that people who were residents would have a much bigger impact and would have a different kind of influence. So location is not usually a huge factor for World Animal Protection. So it's not something they collect globally. They don't have postcodes on everybody like Shelter does, but they needed it just for this action. So they focused on how they can use it for this action. Instead of trying to collect postcode data to see exactly where everybody was, they simply asked the question, do you live in or near Doncaster? So that's how they collected it, with the question on the first action. And then how they used it is two stages. So the first is the first action you get. So when you land on the page and you say, I live near Doncaster, you get a different action than if you say you don't. I'll show you a diagram on the next step. And then there's also a follow-on action. So let's look at how this plays out. You get asked to take an action to stop the Doncaster racecourse from hosting this reptile market. Do you live in or near Doncaster? If you say yes, you get an action which is emailing your local councillor. And then you get the tag applied that says you've taken the councillor action, i.e. you are in Doncaster. If you say no, you, however, get an email action which targets the Doncaster mayor. And you get a different tag, one that reflects the fact that you've contacted the mayor, i.e. do not live in Doncaster. So there's this instant on-page segmentation using that question. But then by using the tags for the different actions, they're able to do different follow-on actions. So if you have said that you are a resident, you get given a different suggested letter for the email to the racecourse director. So you can personalize it and reflect the fact that you live nearby, and this is really important for you. As a result of thinking about what is the most important data here for the supporter experiences, but also for the campaign impact, they were able to really make a real splash locally and also nationally with this. And ultimately, they won the campaign. The racecourse committed to not hosting this event anymore. They'd been hosting it for many, many years. And as a result of this campaign, they have stopped. So it's a huge win. And to quote Sean, mobilizing local people was vital to the campaign win. The local council made it clear that they needed to hear that local residents cared about this in order to take action. So they had a good strategy and they were able to make it work with their data. Even though they didn't have local address information generally on their supporters, they were able to meet that short-term need to create a big impact. And if we look at the technical implementation for this, step one, the supporter takes an action and they get the correct tag. So they don't just get a reptile market tag, they get the reptile market tag for the specific action they took, so you can tell where they are. They also then use CSV files. So the CRM for World Animal Protection currently isn't working brilliantly for the campaigns team. It wasn't set up with them in mind, it was set up for donors in mind, and it doesn't yet support them properly, but that's something that they're working on improving, and they're doing a really great job of, as I say, delivering impact despite this. So they use CSV files. So they have to manually, well, not quite manually, but they have to process this data in a way that isn't a full-on integration. So they have written a script for this. So the script simply takes out the human effort of download and matching the columns. The script will do that for them. So it speeds things up, it reduces some of the human error, and it just makes it a little bit easier. So even though they're having to rely on CSV files, so these are the files you open in Excel, it's still not as cumbersome as it had been previously. So then the CRM automatically creates a file, which is loaded into their email tools. Their CRM is Razor's Edge, as I mentioned. And then the data is available in their email tool, which is a Destra, to be able to send those emails. So I think these are three really interesting examples of where organizations have said, what are our goals? What do we need from the data? They've then taken the data status quo and they've created impact within it. Whether they have a really great integration like shelters that automatically flows between everything, or whether they're working within the limits of using CSV files, by using a good strategy and having a creative, like taking steps forward to improvement rather than waiting to perfection approach, they're able to achieve that. So even if your system supports, so for example, Impact Stack supports a range of different integrations, but if the other side can't take that data, you need to consider how that works too, and again with the workarounds of the CSVs. So you need to make sure your data talks from both sides. It has to be communication. I hope those case studies are really helpful. Again, I wanted to thank the clients for agreeing to let us share their stories of how they manage this and how they create impact within their data situation. I'm here for questions now. I think we have a little bit of time. Yeah, back over to Charity Comms.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you so much for sharing those very tangible examples, because it brings to life real world actions inside charity. So fantastic to have those. So first question I've got is, do you know how the Refugee Council are able to manage overlaps in actions in MailChimp? For example, if someone donates and signs a petition in the same week, would they get two journeys at the same time?
Good question. So the journeys in question in this case study are welcome journeys. So they are designed to be fully integrated. The Refugee Council are really good at doing integrated communications. They don't have a separate, all fundraisers get this and all campaigners get this. They are very much tied up journeys, which I think makes them richer and makes both campaigns and fundraising stronger. So they wouldn't stop the welcome journey. The welcome journey has different phases and different asks within it. And you would simply move through and get different branches that give you a thank you or the next step within that journey.
So I think this is a bit of a follow-up, but are all their welcome email journeys set from the impact stack to MailChimp integration?
They are, but they are set up in a way that allows them to query their CRM as well. So as I mentioned, there's kind of two branches to it. So most of the welcome happens directly through the impact stack MailChimp integration, where it's basically real time. So the data on the actions and the donations just immediately goes across, as well as subscriptions, of course. But what we do in the welcomes in MailChimp is that there's an extra query in there which queries two fields. One is the fields from impact stack, one is the fields from purpose, which is their CRM. So if somebody were to make a donation by phone on purpose, it would have queried both fields and looked for a donation in the last 8 weeks from either their offline systems or impact stack. So it kind of reflects both, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question here, Claire, asking, in what way did your support help the different organisations that you've mentioned? What was the role that you as an agency played?
We've helped in a number of ways. So all of these examples are using our software platform, Impact Stack, but we also have an agency service. So myself or one of our other mobilization experts work with the organisation, the Refugee Council one. We help them to design the welcome journeys, to get the data flowing, to work with them on content, for example. The shelter case study, my colleague Jess has worked really closely with them to support them to make their ideas come to life. So they brought the ideas and we helped them with the tech. And the same with World Animal Protection. So some of them we were very hands-on with as an agency, and for some of them they were simply using software and we were supporting them to do it.
Great, thank you. What do you do when data needs are very different from different departments? So the lack of coherence between what people need. How does the culture and the ways of working help resolve those kind of pulling in different directions?
I think it's really important to start with organizational integration in terms of cross-team working at really early stages in projects. So don't wait until you've got a campaign ready to launch and then going, oh, by the way, fundraising, should we do an ask? You should be planning it together right from the beginning so that both teams feel invested and feel like it's their project and they're a part of it. You can then decide together what the priorities are, what you're going to focus on now, what you're going to focus on later. The difference in it is everyone pulling in the same direction and happy versus one team pulling and the other team being like, we have our own plans right now. And it can make a huge difference just by involving people much earlier on. Even if that's just in a pilot project, if it's not a complete change in your ways of working, it can make a really big difference.
That's really interesting. I wondered if you had a sense of how the journey that charities have gone on in the last few years from being fairly unsophisticated, maybe, but maybe that's unfair, but maybe that they've kind of seen the value of using data to create incredible supporter experiences and journeys. I wondered, as an agency working with so many charity clients, if you've seen that evolution, and where you would say that you've seen great success, and where you think that there are still some weaknesses that they could be addressing.
I think the thing that I've been really impressed with in the last few years, like, well, I guess almost 3 now, isn't it? Gosh, is the innovation and flexibility that's come out. It's been such a challenging environment for everybody to work in a world that's changing very quickly, and is really not the world we were working in and planning for 3 years ago. The innovation that's come out of this, I think, it's just been fantastic. And just, I think some of the stories and examples today, there were some really great ones yesterday as well. I was just so impressed at people pivoting, trying new platforms, engaging their supporters in ways they've not tried before. I think in some ways we've taken some real leap forwards as a sector to considering different approaches and building those authentic connections with supporters online. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great work happening before the pandemic, but I feel like it's accelerated a lot as well.
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen that in our community as well. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, as well as that innovation going on, there's been a change in kind of the internal structures and team skills that charities have built. So that, yeah, there are lots of new roles evolving around data. I wondered if you'd seen any trends or really interesting developments in that area of the communications skill set.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of more teams and more roles having digital as a real core part of their work, and thinking digital first with their communications, rather than it being slightly like what we're going to do with this thing. Oh, how do we make it work on social? How do we make it work on email? So I'm seeing the digital skills are really getting democratized across organizations, which I think is fantastic. And I'm seeing a lot of investment in roles that didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. For example, there's a lot of supporter journey manager and things like this kind of roles, people who are in charge of the whole supporter experience. So not just, I'm going to raise some money and I'm going to run a campaign and I'm going to run an event, but rather, what do our supporters need? What do we need from them? How do we build a healthy relationship here? And I think that's really encouraging, because having that oversight and that not centralized, but just coordinated communications, I think is really good to creating those relationships and making organizations feel like one voice, feeling like a relationship rather than a corporate entity or something. So I'm really, really excited about those roles.
That's really, really interesting. And also, I think, incredibly encouraging, because it's getting us out of the rut that was silo mentality and competition for supporters, and that feeling of, well, we own these people and you own those people over there, and never the twain shall meet. But when you take an audience first approach and think of it from their perspective, you get some really impressive results, and you really build loyalty and have so many more opportunities to ask people to be part of your cause. Brilliant. Well, unusually, we have actually kept within time for the Q&A, which must mean that you addressed a lot of people's burning questions. So I just want to say a really big thank you to you, Claire, for sharing those case studies and for giving us such an insightful presentation to kick off the afternoon. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Stila.